Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Dear beloved seekers of wisdom, today we are starting a series of selected Dhamma talks on Samyutta Nikaya. So if I give a brief introduction to Samyutta Nikaya, the Theravada Buddhism has three baskets: Vinaya, Sutta and Abhidhamma. Sutta is the collection of discourses attributed to Buddha. So this sutta is fivefold. First one is Digha Nikaya, the long discourses. Second one, Majjhima Nikaya, the middle length discourses. Third one is Samyutta Nikaya, the connected discourses. Fourth one, Anguttara Nikaya, numerical discourses. And the fifth one is Khuddaka Nikaya, minor collection of discourses. So this third one is Samyutta Nikaya. Samyutta means connected together or yoked together. In this one Samyutta, under that Samyutta there are several suttas which have a common theme, so that these suttas are categorized or grouped under one Samyutta. So that is why it is called Samyutta Nikaya. So in this Samyutta Nikaya, there are 54 such Samyuttas and 7,762 suttas in this Samyutta Nikaya. So today we are going to start this series of Dhamma talk with Anamatagga Samyutta, which talks about the Samsara. So therefore, before we jump into the suttas, first we need to understand what is Samsara. Sansaranang sansaro, that is the definition of Samsara, which means the continuous wandering. That is Samsara, the continuous wandering. And in general terms, we can say it's the cycle of birth, death and rebirth. So that is the Samsara. And we should learn this Samsara thoroughly, because that is the pivotal point in these teachings, Buddhist teachings. All the other Buddhist teachings are hinged on this concept of Samsara. Therefore, it is very vital to understand this concept when learning the Theravada Buddhism. So the first sutta is called Grass and Wood. So Buddha addresses the monks. This is the Pali prose. This is how the Buddha starts. Anamataggoyam bhikkhave sansaro pubbha kotina panyayati. Avijja nivarananam sattanam tanha sangyojananam sandhavatan sansaratam. The word Anamatagga, it is formed as Anu, Amata, Agga. Anu means Jnanena Anugantva. So which means if someone pursues by knowledge from life to life, and Amata means cannot be known. Agga means the end, the first point. So altogether, Anamatagga means if someone pursues by knowledge from life to life, the first point cannot be known. So that is Anamatagga. And then Buddha talks about the reasons for this samsara, that is avijja and tanha. So what is avijja? That is the ignorance or the delusion. So this avijja or the ignorance conceals the real or the true nature of the object, so that the person gets a wrong impression about that object. So then he will see a good thing as a wrong thing and a wrong thing as a good thing. So it's like wearing dark glasses. When you see outside, you will see all of them dark. But in real nature, they are not dark, they are bright. But why do you see them in dark? Because you are looking at them through dark glasses. So this avijja or this ignorance is like that. It covers the real nature, true nature. And tanha or the craving, that is the desire, lust, love or longing, the clinging towards the object. So when you have this craving, you attached to that object and try to grasp that object. So that is tanha. So if we consider the whole meaning of this Pali prose, it means this samsara is without a discoverable beginning. A first point is not discerned of beings roaming and wandering, obstructed by ignorance and tied down by craving. So when you hear that there is no beginning to this samsara, it is so hard to believe, isn't it? Why? Why is it so hard to believe? Because from our childhood, our minds have been conditioned to think that there is a beginning. For example, there is a concept that there is an Almighty God and He has created this world. So there is a start point, there is a God and He has created this world. He created this world. So there is a starting point. And then the scientists, they have a different idea. They think before 13.8 billion years ago, there was a Big Bang. So this Big Bang happened. From that, this universe and all the galaxies appeared. Then it started the human lives. So in that concept also, in that theory also, it talks about a beginning. So likewise, these all concepts that we have heard talk about beginning. You may not subscribe the idea of God's creation or the Big Bang theory, but the underlying notion of a beginning is ingrained into our understanding. So when we hear that in the samsara there is no beginning, with that understanding, it's mind-boggling. I would like to highlight another thing, that is, when you hear this samsara is without a discoverable beginning, we should not understand it like that the samsara, it has a long duration. Because of that length, we cannot see the beginning. So that implies that there is a beginning and we cannot see it because of the length. No, that is not what Buddha wanted to teach. What he meant was that there is no beginning. So that is what he wanted to teach us. So after this prose. That's the first part. And in the second part, Buddha tried to explain the nature of this samsara. Because it is not possible to logically prove that there is a samsara, and also it is not easy to grasp this idea, so Buddha uses similes to give that understanding. So the first simile is, suppose, monks, a man would cut up whatever grass, sticks, branches and foliage in this Jambudvipa and collect them together into a single heap. Having done that, then he puts them down one by one, saying, "This is my mother. This is my mother's mother." The sequence of that man's mothers, grandmothers, great-grandmothers would not come to an end, yet the grass, sticks, branches and foliage would be used up and exhausted. For what reason? Because this samsara is without a discoverable beginning. So in this simile, Buddha tries to show us the length of this samsara. So Jambudvipa is the Indian continent. So how much grass, sticks, branches and foliage do you think there are in this Jambudvipa? It's incalculable. But even these grass, sticks, branches and foliage would be exhausted. That man's mothers, grandmothers, great-grandmothers would not come to an end, because this samsara is so long that we can't even think of. So then the Buddha draws the conclusion from this simile. Then he says, "For a long time, monks, you have experienced suffering, anguish, disaster, and filled the cemetery. So this is enough to experience revulsion towards all formation. This is enough to become dispassionate towards them. This is enough to be liberated from them." So Buddha urges us, see this samsara. This is all of suffering. This samsara is all of suffering. What we do is suffer. What we do is suffer. So try to understand this suffering and try to see this impermanent nature in this samsara. It's always changing. So with that understanding, try to liberate from this cycle of samsara, cycle of birth, death and rebirth. And that is what he wanted to teach us. Try to see this real nature, the true nature of this samsara. Try to see this suffering in this samsara and try to liberate from this samsara. The second sutta under this Anamatagga Samyutta is the earth. First it has the Pali prose, then the simile and then the conclusion. So I will not repeat this Pali prose. This samsara is without a discoverable beginning. And then Buddha explains the second simile about the earth. Suppose, monks, a man would reduce this great earth to little clay balls size of jujube kernels, and then he put them down, saying, "This is my father. This is my father's father." And the sequence of this man's fathers, grandfathers, great-grandfathers would not come to an end. Yet, this great earth would be used up and exhausted. For what reason? Because this samsara is without a discoverable beginning. So here also Buddha tries to show us the length of this samsara. So if a man to make small such clay balls, how many such clay balls do you think that he can make? Infinite. But this man's, that sequence of fathers, grandfathers and great-grandfathers would not come to an end. Yet this heap of small clay balls would come to an end. Because this samsara is without a discoverable beginning. In Theravada Buddhism, there are many stories about this samsara. Most of them are in Jataka, that is, the Buddha's past lives. One of these Jatakas is Themiya Jataka, the Buddha's past life as the Prince Themiya. So this Prince Themiya, when he was a very little child, one day he was sitting on his father's lap, the king's lap. And then the king's soldiers brought 4 thieves. And then the king meted out the punishment. One to be whipped, one to face impalement, one to endure imprisonment, and one to be struck with spears. When this prince heard this, he could recall his past lives. He could recall his previous life. He was in heaven as a deity. And the life before that, he was in hell suffering. And the life before that, he was a king in the same country. And then he could recall, as a king, he had to do many unwholesome deeds, bad deeds. As a result of that 20 years as a king, he had to suffer 80,000 years. 80,000 years in hell. So then he thought, if I am to become the king again, then I will have to do these bad deeds again, and then I will have to go to hell again. So he didn't want to take this kingship. So then he thought, how could I avoid this kingship? And then he came up with a plan to act like a deaf and dumb person. So he acted as a deaf and dumb child. So the king, queen, with their royal doctors tried to find out what was wrong with this child. But they couldn't. So at the age of 16, the king and the queen, they gave up their hopes for this child. So the king ordered his driver to take this child into the forest and dig a pit and bury him. So then the driver took this child to the forest, and when they were in the forest, the child opened his eyes and looked around, and then he talked to the driver and he explained the reason why he did this. And then he left the driver and went into the forest and became a hermit. So in this story, it shows the real nature, the true nature of this samsara. this prince, apparently, king that we talked about, who had ruled this country for 20 years, so he was one of this prince's great grandfathers. We don't know the number, but there that king, having ruled this country for 20 years and having died there, he born in hell, suffered there for 80,000 years, and then went to heaven, and then came to this human realm as a human prince, Damien. And this shows the suffering in this samsara. He could rule this country for 20 years, but he had to suffer 80,000 in hell. So that is the real nature, the true nature of this samsara. So that is why at the end of this sutta, Buddha re-emphasized this message, this conclusion. For a long time, monks, you have experienced suffering, anguish, disaster, and filled this cemetery. It is enough to experience revulsion towards all formations. It is enough to become dispassionate towards them, and it is enough to be liberated from them. Again, Buddha urges us to see the real nature, the true nature of this samsara. See the suffering in this samsara, and to be liberated from this samsara. Then the third sutta, it's about tears. So Buddha gives the simile. What do you think, monks? Which is more, the tears that you have shed as you roamed and wandered in this long course of samsara, weeping and wailing because of being united with the disagreeables and separated from the agreeables? This, or the water in the four great oceans? Then the monks reply, as we understand the Dhamma taught by the Buddha, the tears we have shed in this long course of samsara alone is greater than the water in the four great oceans. And then Buddha acknowledges that. So here, first we should try to understand this being united with the disagreeables and separated from the agreeables. So let's think about a loud person. So we are with that person. So that is the situation that we like. And after his death, we are living without him. So that is the second situation. So when it says united with the disagreeable is after that loved one passes away, we are in a situation that we don't like. And separated from the loved one is that we are in a situation with that loved one that we like, we are now separating from that. So that is the first situation. So actually, this is saying the same thing in two different ways. So it says, tears we have shed in this long samsara is more than the water in four great oceans. And the next thing is, what are those four great oceans? According to the commentary, it gives a different explanation. But for easy understanding, and also as this is a simile, we will try to assume the great ocean that we know of. So, how many tears do you think a man sheds in a lifetime? And if he were to fill this great ocean with that tears, how many such lives would it take? Infinite number of lives. So again, here Buddha shows with this simile the length of this samsara. And then Buddha says, for a long time, monks, you have experienced death of a mother. The tears that you have shed in this long course of samsara because of death of your mothers is alone more than the water in these four great oceans. And then he continues, death of a father, death of a brother, death of a sister, death of a son, death of a daughter. The tears that we have shed, this alone is more than the water in these four great oceans. So first, Buddha gives a general statement saying that all the tears that we have shed in this long course of samsara is more than water in these four great oceans. And then he narrows it down. And then he says, tears you have shed in this samsara because of loss of a mother. This alone is more than water in this four great ocean. So this reminds me the story of the enlightened nun, Ubbari. She had done many good deeds, wholesome deeds in her past lives. As a result, she was born with a beautiful and attractive figure at the time of Buddha. And the king Kosala brought her to his palace and kept her as one of his queens. Later she gave birth to a baby daughter named Jiva. And the king also loved this baby girl. But unfortunately, after some time, she passed away. And the mother, the queen, Ubbari, she couldn't bear this pain. And she started to go to the cemetery that her daughter was disposed. So one day, she went to the dwelling place of the Buddha, but she didn't talk with him. But later, Buddha asked, "Why are you crying?" And then she said, "Because of loss of my daughter." And then Buddha said, 84,000 of your daughters with the same name, Jiva, were disposed in this same cemetery. For which one are you crying? Now this question, this statement of Buddha is an eye-opener. If a mother and daughter die in this life and reborn as the mother and the daughter, and then to have the same name as Jiva, and then that child to die in a young age, and to dispose her in the same cemetery, what are the odds to happen that? How many years would it take to happen this? And to happen that 84,000 times? we can't even think of the time that it would take to happen this 84,000 times. And this shows the true nature of this samsara. This samsara is without a discoverable beginning. Tears we have shed is more than the water in these four great oceans. So we have suffered a lot in this samsara, and that's why Buddha re-emphasize and conclude this sutta. For a long time, bhikkhus, you have experienced suffering, anguish, disaster, and filled the cemetery. It is enough to experience revulsion towards these formations. It is enough to become dispassionate towards them, and it is enough to liberate it from them. So again and again Buddha urges us to see the real nature, the true nature of this samsara, the suffering in this samsara. So here again Buddha shows with this simile, the tears we have shed, how many times we have cried because of a loss of a mother, a father, brother, sister. So isn't that the same thing happening in this life? When a loss of a mother, we cry. When loss of a father, we cry. But we don't see that this is not the first time that we are crying for the death of a father, death of a mother. In this long samsara, long duration, we have been crying, and crying, filling with tears more than the water in these four great oceans. So this is the nature of this samsara. It is enough to be liberated. So that is the Buddha's teaching. That is the Buddha's advice. The fourth sutta is about mother's milk. So in this sutta, Buddha gives a simile about mother's milk. So Buddha says, "What do you think, monks? Which is more? The mother's milk that you have drunk in this long course of samsara, this or the water in these four great oceans?" And then the monks reply, "As we understand the Dhamma taught by Buddha, the mother's milk that we have drunk in this long course of samsara is more than the water in these four great oceans." And then Buddha acknowledges this. And with this simile also, Buddha tries to show us the length of this samsara. This samsara is without a discoverable beginning. So therefore, again Buddha gives the conclusion. For a long time, monks, you have experienced suffering, anguish, disaster, and filled the cemetery. This is enough to experience revulsion towards all formation. It is enough to become dispassionate towards them. It is enough to be liberated from them. So again and again Buddha urges us to see the real nature, true nature, the suffering nature, the impermanent nature in this samsara, and to liberate from this samsara. With this fourth sutta, we will conclude today's Dhamma talk, and we will discuss few more suttas under this Anamatagga Samyutta in the next Dhamma talk. So I wish, may you understand the real nature, the true nature, suffering nature of this samsara, and may you try your best to liberate from this samsara. May all the merits we accumulated from this Dhamma talk and listening to Dhamma help us to have that wisdom to liberate from this samsara. Idamme punya kammang asavakkaya vahang hotu sabba dukkha pamunchatu. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.